Hare Krishna. Today we will discuss Srimad Bhagavatam, first canto, chapter 6, conversation between Narada and Vyasadeva, text 33 and 34. Verse 33. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Prajayata Svaviryani. Tirthapada Priyashava. Ahuta Iva Me Shiham. Darshanam Yati Chetase. Word for word translation. Prajayata, thus singing. Svaviryani, own activities. Tirthapada, the Lord whose lotus feet are the source of all virtuous or holiness. Priyashrava, pleasing to hear. Ahutta, called for. Eva, just like. Me, to me. Shigham, very soon. Darshanam, sight. Yati, appears. Setasi, on the seat of the heart. Translation and purport by Abhay Charnavinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki. The Supreme Lord Shri Krishna, whose glories and activities are pleasing to hear, at once appears on the seat of my heart, as is called for, as soon as I begin to chant his holy activities. Purport. The absolute personality of Godhead is not different from his transcendental fame, form, pastimes, and the sound vibrations thereof. As soon as a pure devotee engaged himself in the pure devotional service of hearing, chanting, and remembering the name, fame, and activities of the Lord, at once he becomes visible to the transcendental eyes of the pure devotee by reflecting himself on the mirror of the heart by spiritual television. Therefore, a pure devotee who is related with the Lord in loving transcendental service can experience the presence of the Lord at every moment. It is a natural psychology in every individual case that a person likes to hear and enjoys personal glories enumerated by others. That is a natural instinct. And the Lord being also an individual personality like others is not an exception to this psychology, because psychological characteristics visible in the individual souls are but reflections of the same psychology in the Absolute Lord. The only difference is that the Lord is the greatest personality of all and absolute in all his affairs. It is therefore the Lord. If therefore the Lord is attracted by the pure devotee's chanting of his glories, there is nothing astonishing. Since he is absolute, he can appear himself in the picture of his glorification, the two things being identical. Srila Narada chants the glorification of the Lord, not for his personal benefit, but because the glorifications are identical with the Lord. Narada Muni penetrates into the presence of the Lord by the transcendental chanting. Here again, hear the verse. Prajayata Svaviryani Tirthapada Priyashava. Who ahuta ivame shigham darshanam yati shetasha. Supreme Lord Sri Krishna, whose glories and activities are pleasing to hear, at once appears on the seat of my heart, and as is called for, as long as I begin to chant his holy activities. Om Ajnanatimandasya Janjana Shaka Chakshurmritam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah. Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Staptam Yena Bhutale Shvamrupkadamyam Dadati Sva Padantikam Vandeham Shiro Shiyuda Padkamam Shirom Vaishnavam Sha Shri Rupam Jagajatam Saganaraganatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savdutam Parjana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sagalita Shivishakam Vitam Sha He Krishna Garuna Sindhu Dinabandha Jatpate Gopesha Gopra Kanta Radha Kanta Namastate Tapta Kanchna Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhana Sutta Devi Panamama Haripriye Pankha Kalpa Visha Kripasan Vivisha Padnam Pavanabhyo Vaishnavyo Namo Namo Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktavina Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram, Ram, Hare Hare. Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhakti Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gaurvani Pacharani Nirvishesha Srinivadi Paskachani Dasatani Srila Prabhupada Ki. So in the purport there are two main points. The human psychology is explained as a part of the divine psychology of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. At least one aspect, hearing one's own glories. But the other point is that Krishna dances on the tongue of one who is sincerely chanting his holy name, as Narada Muni is doing here. The Lord appears on the seat of my heart. So he feels immediately the presence of the Lord when he's chanting. So that requires purity. Then we can perceive the Lord in our heart when we are chanting. Of course, the Lord is always in our heart, but we will feel his presence. He appears, it is mentioned here. So the second point is or the first point, the psychology is explained here. Everyone wants to hear their own glories. So if someone speaks about our good qualities, then we like to hear that. Why? Why is that so? Because this tendency comes from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He likes to hear his own glories. And we are like him. We like to hear our glories. But what's the issue here? Are we really glorious? So, but Krishna is actually glorious. Therefore, his hearing of his glories has a validity. Let's say someone says this person here is a very intelligent person. Is it true? Are we actually intelligent? No. The reality is we are quite foolish. If we were intelligence, then why, if we were intelligent, then why are we in the material world? Why should we be stuck in this body made of stool and urine? If we are intelligence, then why are we running after the mirage of material entanglement, enjoyment, which is entanglement? So the conclusion is we are not actually intelligent. But out of illusion, we think ourselves intelligent. What do we know? We don't know. What do we know? We don't know very much. Our memories are quite short. We are very much forgetful. We don't know the Vedas. We don't have material knowledge. So every kind of praise we receive is based on the misconception of being this body. And it is also not correct. But if someone says Krishna is very intelligent, then that is factually an understatement. He is the most intelligent. His glories are actually worthy to be chanted. Another name of Krishna is Uttama Sloka, one which glorified with the choicest poetry. So Father like Son, we are all sons of God. So Lord Narayan said to Narada Muni, Naham tistami vaikunte yoginam redayisuva yatra gayanti mat bhakta tatra tisthami Narada. My dear Narad, I do not dwell in Vaikuntha or in the hearts of the yogis, but wherever my devotees sing my glories. This is from the Padma Purana. Where the devotees sing my glories, there the Lord is present. Therefore, if we hear the Bhagavatam, we hear the Lord's glories, then the Lord is present. When we chant holy names of Krishna, Krishna is present. Of course, we like to hear our own glorification. That is a sales technique. If you want to sell something, first glorify the person. And that makes them favorably disposed. So, but factually, what do we know about the glories of the Lord before we came into Krishna consciousness? It's by the grace of Srila Prabhupada we know about the glories of the Lord. So also Lord Ram, he glorified all the Vanaras, the monkeys. And when Hanuman came before Lord Ram and Sita, Sita gave him a pearl garland. And then And then Hanuman broke the pearl, the garland, and started to chew on the pearls, trying to break them. So Sita was quite astonished and said, "Oh, to Lord Rama, what is he doing? Is that respectful?" That he breaks the gift that I give and chews on it. So they asked Hanuman, and Hanuman said, "Yeah, I'm chewing each pearl and break it to see if Sitaram is inside the pearl." Of course, Sitaram Lakshman, that they are glorified. When we always chant the glories of the Lord appears on the seat of the heart. That's, yeah. Therefore, we should always chant Hari Katha, glorification of the Lord, and avoid Gramya Katha. Only this Krishna Katha will help us in our lives. And that is teaching here of Narada Muni to Srila Vyasadeva, who will now instruct him to meditate on the absolute truth with devotion and write the Srimad Bhagavatam. Factually, these chapters from 3 to 7, they are the history of the Bhagavatam, how the Bhagavatam came about. That and Narada Muni, he presented, presented the story of his own life, previous life, to demonstrate the potency of bhakti and the potency of glorifying the Supreme Lord. Because he was constantly chanting the holy names. And here Narada Muni is sharing with us his realizations. Just by chanting the holy names, I appear on the seat of the heart. That, of course, for us, that's a process which is explained in the third canto, from Bhakti Yoga, Parivabhina, Richarya, Ases, etc. Yeah, I don't remember all the Sanskrit, but the pure devotees, they glorify the Supreme Lord. And when they hear this Krishna Katha, then the Lord takes seat in the heart, in the form the devotee feels attracted to. So that's the same thing. But it's by this hearing Krishna Katha that we come to purify our heart. Then we can see the Lord on the seat of our heart. That all our practice is geared to feeling the Lord constantly in the heart. Lord Krishna said, Yoginam apisarvam matrantrachman shadbhabachabdeyomam samyuktatamam. The highest yogin is one who is united in love with me within the heart. And that, so that's also our deity worship practice, is meant to feel Krishna in our heart, to transfer the deity to our heart. Lord Kapila Dev says. But the most potent process for us is the chanting of this holy name. The glories and activities. We chant the holy name, and it satisfies glories and activities. And that's what the Bhagavatam is about, glories and activities. And therefore, because the Bhagavatam was not there at that time, that so Narada Muni requested Srila Vyasadeva to write it, because all the other things he wrote did not glorify the Supreme Lord sufficiently, and that was the cause of his despondency. So as long as we are absorbed in hearing activities, the glories and activities of the Lord, we will feel satisfied. If we stop this even for a moment and we listen to our mind, then it becomes horrible. That should never come under the control of the mind. So that is actually the process to control the mind, to engage it in transcendence. That if it's not engaged, the mind will engage us. So this is an important lesson here we get from Narada Muni. We will read also text 34. Etadhi aturashitanam matra sparsasayamahum bhavasindo plavodristo harisayano varnanam. It is personally experienced by me that those who are always full of cares and anxiety due to desiring contact of the senses with their objects can cross the ocean of nations on a most suitable boat, the constant chanting of the transcendental activities of the personality of Godhead. Srila Prabhupada's purport. The symptom of a living entity, of a living being, is that he cannot remain silent even for some time. He must be doing something, thinking something, or talking about something. Generally, the materialistic man think and discuss about subjects which satisfy their senses. But as these things are exercised under the influence of the external illusory energy, such sensual activities do not actually give them any satisfaction. On the contrary, they become full with cares and anxieties. This is called Maya, or what is not. That which cannot give them satisfaction is accepted as an object for satisfaction. That which cannot give them satisfaction is accepted as an object of satisfaction. So what an illusion. So Narada Muni, by his personal experience, says that satisfaction for such frustrated beings engaged in sense gratification is to chant always the activities of the Lord. The point is that the subject matter only should be changed. No one can check the thinking of the activities of a living being, nor the feeling, willing, or working processes. But if one wants actual happiness, one must change the subject matter only. Instead of talking of the politics of a dying man, one might discuss the politics administered by the Lord himself. Instead of relishing activities of the cinema artist, one can turn his attention to the activities of the Lord with his eternal associates like the Gopis and Lakshmis. The almighty personality of Godhead, by his causeless mercy, descends on the earth and manifests activities almost on the line of the worldly man, but at the same time extraordinarily, because he is the Almighty. He does so both for the benefit of all conditioned souls, so they can turn their attention to transcendence. By doing so, the conditioned soul will hardly be promoted to the transcendental position and easily cross the ocean of nations, the source of all miseries. This is stated from personal experience by such an authority as Sri Narada Muni. And we can have the same experience also if we begin to follow in the footsteps of the great sage, the dearmost devotee of the Lord. So this is encouraging. Narada Muni tells how he became this great sage with a transcendental body. That Srila Prabhupada says we can have the same experience. So we can also do it. If we begin to follow in the footsteps of the great sage, the dearmost devotee of the Lord. So therefore we have heard this life that how can we follow in the footsteps of Narada Muni? So what did we hear about his life? How dedicated he was to the chanting of the holy names. So the symptom of a living being is that he cannot be silent even for some time. That's a subject which is brought forward in the Bhagavad Gita again and again. So he brings that in the beginning of the 6th chapter again. One cannot, the soul cannot be silent, inactive. That it is said here, the Gita 6:1, that next one. So it is not one who is detached from the fruits of his work and does not fulfill his obligations, that he is a sannyasi, that it is not the one who does not light fire in the sacrificial, who does not light the sacrificial fire and does not do its duty. It's a French Gita I'm trying to translate, but the point here is, yes, that one must be active. One cannot be inactive. Also in the 3rd chapter, it's mentioned that so this is very important, that we engage our psychophysical nature in the service of the Lord, and therefore Prahlad Maharaj mentioned we have 9 processes of devotional service, which helps us to fix our mind constantly on the Supreme Lord. Because the purpose of everything is Maya Saktamanapata Yoga Yunga Matashvasa Samsyam Samaham Yatashikna Stachinu. Krishna says to us, you're here now. How by fixing your mind on me, you can know me in full. That, of course, we know there are conditions to this process of hearing. That because it is said also that because in the beginning of the 9th chapter of the Gita, there Lord Krishna makes the point that pravakshami anasuyavi, that you are not envious, Arjuna, and therefore I give you this knowledge, and the most confidential realization of this knowledge, because the Bhagavatam is meant for the Nirmatsaram Satam. It's meant for those who are non-envious, that non-envious, Nirmatsaram Satam. So to come to that point of being non-envious, one must have a mood. And that's explained by Lord Chaitanya. Trinata Pisanitsanata Oravi Saisne Amana Manadna Kirtanya Sadari. One must be tolerant and humble. If one is not tolerant and humble, one cannot access the spiritual nature or get any realization from the hearing. So therefore this is so important, that to come to that point of being humble and tolerant. It's also the first instruction in Bhagavad Gita. One should be tolerant, as tolerating the heat in the summer and the cold in the winter. That and if one can do that, Yamina Vyatatantrite Purusham Purushashaba Samudokasakam Dram Samitat Verkalpate. Then Krishna says, if one can tolerate all this, one is ready. One is ready to enter the transcendental platform. So that's one way it is confirmed, that the importance of tolerance, and also the importance here of envy. That, of course, one who is addicted to sense gratification means he's envious. That's going together. Because what is envy? Envy means wanting to enjoy something what belongs to another. Everything belongs to Krishna, and we want to enjoy it. So these 2 points are important. So there is a behavior, an internal mood we need to develop while hearing. Then the hearing, then Krishna says here in 9.1 Bhagavad Gita, because you are never envious, I will give you the most secret knowledge and the most confidential realization. He gives realization because he's not non-envious. So we can derive realization from the Bhagavatam. At the same time, if we hear the Bhagavatam, that and that is also confirmed by verses in the Bhagavatam, that if we just hear the Bhagavatam, at least for the time being, we are non-envious and peaceful. So that's already an immediate effect. Of course, also the Bhagavatam says 177, I think. So one who injects this Bhagavatam by oral reception, he becomes free from lamentation, illusion, and fear. Because the lamentation, illusion, and fear comes from this acting out of envy. That so it helps also to remove this from our heart. That but because Srila Prabhupada writes also in the purport, that by doing so, the conditioned soul will gradually be promoted to the transcendental position. So gradually, because by hearing the Bhagavatam, our impurities, this envy is also removed. Although it is Bhagavatam is for the Paramahamsas, those who are Nirma Amala, yeah. It is Amala Puran. It's mentioned for those who are non-envious, the Paramahamsas. We condition soul, if we hear it in the right mood, we will also become purified and will become non-envious. That you may remember in the Bhagavad Gita, in the 12th chapter, verse 14 to 20. Verse 14 explains that the transcendental qualities, spiritual qualities. And the first quality described there is non-envious. There we have, that's the first quality of a devotee, non-envious. But to become non-envious, one must first be humble and tolerant. Therefore, in the 13th chapter, verses 9 to 12, Amanitvan is the first quality. Amanitvan means humility. That so yes, Srila Prabhupada explains it very simply in the purport. That just only the subject of our thinking, feeling, willing, and our attention of our mind has to be changed. That so that is the process. So if we want actual happiness, one must change the subject matter only. So that's important. That therefore we have always to engage in subject matters connected with Krishna, and connect everything what we do with Krishna. Krishna must become the center and not us. So instead of talking of the politics of a dying man, one must discuss the politics administered by the Lord himself. That politics administered by the Lord himself. Instead of relishing activities of cinema artists, one turns his attention to the activities of the Lord with his eternal associates like the Gopis and Lakshmis. So also, Vyasadeva in some sense did that by writing the Mahabharata, to connect everything with Krishna in the Mahabharata. For hearing stories, people here like to hear stories. There are so many stories in the Bhagavatam, and we learn from them that it's interesting. It is also our recreation at the same time. That and it's by Krishna's mercy that we have this Bhagavatam. Because the Bhagavatam writes about his activities, his pastimes. That and Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, Janma karmas medvam yome vita tatvatyakvam punarsamama naitimamiti sarana. One who knows these pastimes and activities of mind does not take birth again. So that means, what does that mean, knowing them? That because if we know them, then we start to know Krishna. And then we can understand our own position. And then we can realize our relationship with Krishna, our position, and then act in that relationship. So that's a process. One who goes to the Bhagavatam with sincerity will go to that process, that Sambandha, Abhideya, Prayoja, that. But that's a gradual process, Prabhupada. Gradually we will be promoted to the transcendental position and easily cross the ocean of nations. It's gradual, we may say it's still far away, but by practicing it constantly, we experience already happiness and satisfaction. That if it's practiced in accordance with the instructions of authorities like Narada Muni, then we must do it under authorities. And then we can experience the same as Narada Muni. That so Narada Muni feels compassion for all living entities. He has attained this position, and he wants all others also to attain this position. And that's a gentle person. The characteristics of a gentle person are explained in the 4th canto, the 834, where Narada Muni tells Dhruva Maharaj, says Dhruva Maharaj, that yes, a gentle person is someone, if he meets someone more elevated than him, he will take shelter of that person and serve that person and inquire from that person. If one eats someone on an equal platform, then one makes friends with that person. And when one meets someone less elevated, he will try to elevate that person. So that is Narada Muni. He wants to elevate everyone to that pure platform of pure devotional service. And therefore is preaching the glories of the Supreme Lord constantly, everywhere. And we had heard probably yesterday, Nrsimha Chaturdasi, how Prahlad Maharaj was preaching also to his schoolmates, and they became all Vaishnavas. And Prahlad Maharaj said, yes, you have these yogis in the Himalayas, but they are only concerned with their own spiritual elevation. But I cannot tolerate all these fools and rascals who are trying to enjoy Maya Sukha, this illusory energy. I feel great compassion for them, and I want to elevate them So that is the compassion of a Vaishnava, that and therefore he's inducing Srila Vyasadeva to act with the same compassion and compile the Srimad Bhagavatam. That so this is the history of the Bhagavatam. The Bhagavatam factually begins at the beginning of the second canto, where Sukadev starts to instruct Maharaj Pariksit all what he has heard from his father, all what he has heard from Srila Vyasadeva. That, but of course, the first canto is very important. The first canto set the scene, and all the parties and the history of the Bhagavatam. How, because the history continues, because the Bhagavatam was spoken to Maharaj Pariksit by Sukadev Goswami, and it will lead us to the point of understanding where Sukadev, where Maharaj Pariksit sat down in the Ganges to hear the Bhagavatam. That so it's also interesting to see what he went through before he decided to hear the Bhagavatam. That was first, if we want to hear the Bhagavatam, we must first appreciate its value. And that value of the Bhagavatam is explained in the first canto, how it came about and what is its uniqueness. It's only Amala Puran, the only pure Purana, the Bhagavad Purana, Bhagavad, where the Lord is in the center completely, which is transcendental by nature. All the other Puranas are not transcendental. Only this is meant for the Paramahamsas. Different Vedic scriptures are meant for different classes of people. 6 Puranas are meant for those in ignorance, 6 Puranas are meant for those in passion, then 5 Puranas for those in goodness, and the 18th Purana is for those who want to transcend material nature and go back to Godhead. So that makes the Bhagavatam very unique. And only the Bhagavatam gives a problem to solve all material problems, because it transcends material nature. It transcends also all suffering. And that makes it very unique. So what did we hear today? We started with explaining the first point, that when we hear the glorious and activities of the Lord with a sincere heart, the Lord appears in our heart. That was the first point. That yes. And then the second point, we spoke about psychology of wanting to become glorified. So we explained that only the Supreme Lord is really worthy of glorified. The Supreme Lord and his pure devotees. But the conditioned souls, they are fools. No intelligence, no good qualifications, practically. And then we heard about in the next part that by hearing constantly the transcendental activities of the Lord, we can give up all our anxieties. that anxiety is due to contact with the senses. So we must take a suitable boat, and that boat to cause the ocean of suffering is the constant chanting of the transcendental activities of the personality of Godhead. That is the suitable boat we need to take. That and there are different verses in the Bhagavatam who speaks about these boats. That the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord has the boat to transcend material ocean of suffering, to cross over material ocean of suffering. One would take shelter of Krishna's lotus feet, then this ocean becomes like the waters in a calf's hoof, that in the impression of a calf's hoof. One can easily cross beyond it. That, but this process is explained here also by Narada Muni, constant chanting of the activities and activities and pastimes of the Supreme Lord. That and then we can get satisfaction, a satisfaction which is not from this world, because everything we do in this world for ourselves is finally full of frustration at the end. That's the result of the mode of passion. So thank you. I will stop here. Please let me know if there are any questions. Any question?
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Yeah. Thank you very much for nice class. Any questions, comments? Anyone? Yeah, we have some devotees here.
Yeah. Hare Krishna.
So, Maharaj, I have one question. So, engaging ourselves constantly about hearing about the Lordship. So, on today's world, practical basis, how can we do that? Because mind always tries to go towards more attractive things, so-called attractive things, like it likes to read or hear more about the news, what's happening in the world.
Yeah, I understand your question. I hope you are still online, because your picture seems to be frozen. That seems to be an internet issue. That, but
Cinema theater and watch.
please.
But now it is, yeah, sorry, man.
It's okay now? You hear me?
Yes, Maharaj, I can hear.
Yeah.
We can.
So the point is, yes, many times we have to do so many things and we forget Krishna. And that's just reality. But it's important we have a good sadhana and hear sufficient about Krishna during the day. Srila Prabhupada says 2 hours reading that. And we can hear in different ways. We can read from the books, but while we are driving, we can hear in Prabhupada and so many, arrange our lives that we have a balance in hearing and other activities. That that would be my advice. Look at your balance, that at the balance, that you have sufficient hearing during the day, and make hearing about Krishna a priority, that so that you don't absorb only in solving problems and so many things during the day, must also be done. That, but it will be less troublesome if you hear sufficient. You will get spiritual strength. That's so important, because I'm always thinking, I don't know if that's helpful for you, but if we think deep, who are we? That we will come to the conclusion that we have factually nothing to do with this material world. But our real business is engaging in our relationship with Krishna, because when we leave this body, that will remain that relationship with Krishna. All the others is not reality. It's gone. All what you want to achieve, all your attachment, all your problems here, you leave it behind. There's no value. The value is our relationship with Krishna. Therefore, it's important sufficiently to cultivate that relationship. So when the time of leaving the body comes, that you give up your attachment to whatever attachment is left to this world, and that your attachment is transferred to our relationship with Krishna. And only in that mood, we must do our job, even solving these problems as in relationship to Krishna. That always think, yeah, it's all temporary. And thinking the temporary as permanent is illusion. And that is our error that we make. And therefore, we think these things very important. I was reading this morning here in Montreal from Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita. And in the Lilamrita, it was, Prabhupada was 45. And he moved. First, he was living with his wife in the house of his in-laws of, but then later he moved out. That and it is said he was doing his business, but his real thing was his translations, his study of the Bhagavatam, and writing books. That was his real business. And the other was only his family life and so on. That was all only supporting that. So that shows Prabhupada's priority. He was 45 at that time. So by following in Srila Prabhupada's footsteps, we can put us as a priority in our lives. Does that help? Purnachandra. Yeah, you are muted. You are muted. I don't hear you.
Okay, sorry, Maharaj. Yeah, there was a internet issue, so we missed maybe a couple of sentences in the beginning. But we understood that you're saying that we should have some fixed time in the day to hear, and also remind ourselves our real position. So that will help us to always get connected.
Yeah, it's a gradual process. By hearing the Bhagavatam, we become more sober by time, and we remember all our frustrations. That's material life, and everything ends up in frustrations. So that's not the goal of our life, solving these problems and so on. The goal of our life is becoming, change our consciousness, connect with the higher reality, and live in that reality, live in our relationship with Krishna. And that will continue after death. All the other things, they go. So that's therefore priority. Priority is required. Does that help?
Yes, Maharaj. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good.
And also one small question, if you have time, Maharaj.
Yeah.
Maharaj, you did mention in the earlier part of the class that we like somebody praising us because that is in Krishna. Krishna also likes his glorification. So similarly, how to understand many times as an individual, we like to criticize somebody, or we like to be in position of superiority, saying, "Oh, I am better than the other." So how to understand? Is it that because Krishna has that tendency?
That this is due to the influence of the modes of material nature, passion and ignorance. By that we come in a situation of duality, good and bad, which is factory and illusion connected with the body. That yes, we tend to criticize someone easily. It's like we are in this prison of the material world, and we criticize another prisoner, but we are also a prisoner. It doesn't help. Better to see the faults in our own heart and in the heart of others. That's a very important principle. The devotee always thinks the fault lies in me and not in the other. Of course, in managerial positions, you may have to correct someone, but not in a way of criticism. The criticism may be there, but it's to help this person advance spiritually. And when can you do that? You can only do that when you feel not envious towards this person. If you feel envious towards this person, there's a deep problem. Don't criticize, even if you are in a material position to do that. So that's looking in our own heart. That and it's something to realize that it's. But when the heart becomes pure, we give up that tendency. We rather glorify devotees. Glorify devotees for their spiritual achievements, for their service attitude, and so on, that for their spiritual qualities. And that will inspire the devotees to develop further spiritually. And someone who was great in it was our divine spiritual master, Bhakti Charamaj. He was glorifying everyone, that to a great extent. Of course, it could also sometimes be hard to correct his devotees, his disciples, but mostly he was always respecting and glorifying them in wonderful ways. And that's good. That helps us to see the good qualities in others. And by seeing the good qualities in others, we develop these good qualities. So that's a good practice for us. But of course, it should be done with discrimination. If you see that if someone has a problem and you glorify him, not according to reality, then you may aggravate the problem, and it may become more puffed up. That's so we have to do that with discrimination. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Does that help?
Yes, Maharaj.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you. I see. Vinod Manjari, do you have a question?
Hare Krishna Maharaj, only one question, Maharaj. When you were saying about we have to develop humility and tolerance before we can progress.
Yeah.
How do we develop more humility then? In what ways will help us to become more humble and tolerant?
Humility is the first item of knowledge. So if we hear this transcendental knowledge and the Bhagavatam, we become aware about Krishna's position, and then we understand how insignificant we are, how
Yeah.
dependent we are on him in every aspect. And that's true. Even if you go to the spiritual world, Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, in the Trisloka Gita, at the end, the 15th chapter, I think, there he says, yes, there is the liberated soul and there is the conditioned soul, and I'm above them. So what Krishna is saying there is, if you are in the material world, you are under the material energy, and this material energy is controlled by Krishna. If you are in the spiritual world, you are under the spiritual energy, and this energy is also controlled by Krishna. So we are controlled by Krishna, either in the liberated or the spiritual position. Of course, in the spiritual position, we have more freedom. But if you become aware of that, you become very humble and pray every moment to Krishna. That a devotee knows, yes, that the one who can free me from karma is only Krishna. And the one who will decide which part of my karma I will get is also Krishna. So we become humble. Humility is the key of entering the spiritual platform. Without this humility, not possible. And tolerance also. Tolerance we must develop. Tolerance, the so-called good and bad. That I see also I'm traveling now. Sometimes suddenly you get have very heavy neck pain and you have to continue. You have to tolerate that, and we go on that, and we try our best. Always praying for Krishna's mass. Is that all?
Yeah. Thank you, Maharaj.
Okay, good. Thank you very much. So I'm now going for the next class in 10 minutes. I have to give the class here in Montreal. One class after another. Thank you very much. So, I'm looking forward to see you, Purnachandra Prabhu, next week, Wednesday, the normal time that I'll try my best. Hare Krishna.
No, thank you very much taking your time out from the busy schedule. We really appreciate. Thank you.
Haribo. Jai. Srila
Jai
Prabhupada
Shiva.
ki,
Jai Guru.
Guru Maharaj ki.
Jai.
Haribo.